And thus the George Floyd Autonomous Zone was born. I guess coinciding with the beginning of the trial of Derek Chauvin, the cop who is accused of heinously murdering George Floyd. Apparently, there's this is not my words. This is the words of the news media, believe it or not, left-wing militants who have set up an autonomous zone around the memorial to George Floyd's life, which I believe that it's, in the area where he died. But according to an on-the-ground reporter who was, I believe, with the local news, it wasn't some independent media guy, this seems to span multiple blocks, and he was filming outside of it, just sort of at the gates where they had set up their barricades. And I mean, actually, it looked like they had some primitive tank traps even, which was kind of funny to see. But even that was too much for them. A couple of skinny white kids in all black came up and said, "Hey man, you're not supposed to be here. We know who you are. Get out of here." I guess to come up to and intimidate him. They weren't like, black people from the hood or something like that. So they didn't seem to be, I guess, the typical BLM demographic. They were the more Antifa types. Let's just say that the optics for the George Floyd Autonomous Zone are not pristine, especially since the nephew of an anti-cop black activist was just killed in the George Floyd Autonomous Zone. He was shot near the memorial, and they would not allow an ambulance or police in to try and carry him away. So some people carried him on foot outside where the ambulance could pick him up, but apparently by that point it was too late for him. So when you see white folks manning the gates and black people getting killed on the inside, you can see how that just doesn't send the right message. We're not getting nearly the same kind of response from the media about this little encampment as we did about CHAZ back in Seattle. Obviously, when they interviewed the aunt of that guy who was killed, within the I guess we should call it the CHAZ, George Floyd Autonomous Zone. I don't know. That doesn't sound good. I'll have to think of a better name. So the woman they interviewed, who was apparently a known local activist, perhaps some would consider her to be too moderate. I guess that might be the complaint that some of the left-wing militants have with her. She was not happy with the left-wing militants. She stopped short of condemning them, totally. She did not disavow them by any means. So the level of unity on the left is obviously much stronger than it is on the right, to say the least. Even after her nephew was murdered by these people, she refuses to totally disavow them because she doesn't want to show, disunity on her political side. But she's being now widely quoted, as calling the situation volatile, which seems to be pretty accurate. But like I said with the last time with the CHAZ, the people who I'm worried about in this situation are the folks who actually live in this area, because anybody else can just avoid it. You can drive around it. They have gridded streets in Minneapolis. If you normally drive through this area, you can just go around. You don't have to go through it. If you're a cop, you can choose to avoid it. They say no cops allowed. The cops go, okay, we don't care. But the people who can't really get away from this, or the people whose homes are on the other side of their barricades, and you can see in the shot that local news station was doing, there are houses back there. This is not just like a business district like it was in Seattle, where you had some people living there, but it was mostly businesses, I believe. Here, there are houses. This is, this is residential as well as commercial. It's a normal city where you have mixed, not mixed-use properties so much, but, you've got stores on the corner, you've got houses in between, you've got, different kinds of businesses where people theoretically have to go to work. I remember back in CHAZ, I believe there was a a mechanics shop that was, they were camped out all night in their building to protect it, and one of the Chazians broke in and tried to start a fire, and that created a whole, that created a standoff that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, CHAZ ultimately settled and was able to extract the hard-headed miscreant from his side who had infiltrated these people's property. But as funny as it may sound, I have not seen any evidence that there's someone as level-headed as CHAZ running the George Floyd Autonomous Zone. It just seems to be a band of Antifa miscreants, and there's no clear leader that we've seen thus far. And so therefore, without that moderating force, without a real warlord to keep the warriors in check, these rebels will go in search of a cause anywhere they can find it. And I'm afraid that will lead to them terrorizing the local residents. I mean, you have to think, when you see homes like this, it's not just going to be military-aged males who can defend themselves living in this area. There could be single women, there could be wives, there could be children, there could be older people. Because I'm sure whenever they moved into their home, they did not expect it to turn into being this far in the interior of the United States. They did not think that they would have to worry about some sort of occupying force coming in and terrorizing them. I'm sure that they thought that they could at least always count on the police for some level of protection of their basic liberties, even if the police sometimes were not always fair to them. They could have a baseline for what they could expect, but that bar has just completely collapsed in recent days. The police have seemingly abandoned these people. The police were unable to help that poor kid I talked about earlier. Well, I don't know about kid. He was a young adult in his 20s, I think. That guy who got killed, they weren't able to help him. They didn't let him in. They didn't let the cops in. The cops didn't, force their way in. And so if these people go, breaking into somebody's house to try and steal food or something, or to steal jewelry so they can sell it and fund their terrorist actions, and the person, calls the police and says, hey, somebody's breaking into my house, they're gonna, kill my kids, or something like that, I would imagine the cops are not going to come, because they didn't come to rescue that other guy. And self-defense is not really a great option in this case, because even if you have a gun and you're in this area and some people just trying to break into your house and they're halfway through your window, if you shoot them, the rest of the mob is not going to say, oh, well, that guy was trying to break into your house, it's bad. They're going to say, we don't believe in private property. You shot that guy. It doesn't matter if he was coming in your house. Maybe he just wanted a sandwich. So what? Who are you to keep that sandwich out of his mouth? You're stealing food from him. You stole his life. You are the evil one here, and then the mob will come for you. And so they'll all attack you. And you can't, with a handgun or whatever, you're not going to fight off the mob. I don't know. I guess you could say theoretically, well, maybe you'd scare them if you actually shot somebody. These dumb Antifa kids would be spooked. But I'm not going to take that chance. So the folks living there are in an impossible situation. A situation they never asked for, something they never deserved, and something that they should never have to worry about. I think the Minneapolis Police Department should be ashamed of itself. So should the city government, assuming that the mayor or whoever it is just like in Seattle, ordering the police to not help anyone in this area, to just let it burn. And if this doesn't get cleaned up soon, if the situation is not resolved, if the so-called left-wing militants are not rounded up and escorted out, and order restored in this area, I think that there are going to be even more tragedies than just the death of this one guy who was, at least somewhat involved with the protest. Although, the actual, protester types seem to be afraid to go in there themselves, and I think for good reason. Who knows? Maybe these people are going to, just leave the local residents alone, and they're only going to mess with other people who are directly interacting with them. But I mean, I don't know. If you're walking down the street and you bump into one of these guys, when they know they're in charge, I mean, it's like the mob back in the 30s. these young little punks who would join the mob, or any gang really, you bump into them or anything of any slight, it's an excuse for them to use their power over you. And frankly, you have the same situation with the police. But I do think that, generally speaking, the police are a little more accountable than this current situation. This is a very extreme situation in this George Floyd autonomous zone where there is zero accountability, zero justice. We can talk all day we want about the system being rigged typically in favor of the actions of police, and police don't get held to account enough, and I tend to agree with that. But it's not this extreme. You don't want to be ruled by an Antifa mob. That is not that's not a good situation. So with that said, I'm going to leave this off for today, and I will continue monitoring the situation.